Hello and welcome to the Indie Bandits podcast. I'm Joe and today I'm joined by Jimmy.
Hello.
And Archie.
Aries.
And we're going to be talking about a few action-adventure indie games that we've been playing. Now, last time when we were speaking about action-adventure games, I think we roughly defined them as basically any other game that doesn't fit in a category. Do you disagree with that, lads?
Seems to be.
Pretty much.
So, maybe you guys did this a little bit different to me, but for me, I picked a game that has a story and a strong narrative element to satisfy the adventure criteria, and also requires player dexterity or manual skill to actually play it, if you get me. So rather than you wouldn't be able to have anything like turn-based for action adventure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
If you got me, I assume you've all done the same.
I believe so.
Much.
Cool. So which of you would like to start? Who feels they've got the most glowing review for the game they're talking? Because I think we should start with something nice.
I really, really like my game.
I enjoyed my game, so yeah, I think Archie should go first.
You only enjoyed yours?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, that's a good one. How's that not positive?
Sizzle like coming from James.
I mean, I'm not gushing over it, but I enjoyed it. It's still a positive thing.
Well, I'm not a huge fan of mine, so maybe I'll go in the middle, and Jimmy, you can round us out with some lukewarm praise.
Okay.
So Archie, what's the game you've been playing?
Alright, so I've been playing Hellblade Senua's Sacrifice, which is a game that came out in 2017, so it's a little older now, and I'm assuming everybody who's, into games, play games, has probably heard of this game already, but why not? Let's talk about it again, because I think it's pretty fantastic overall. It really kind of is on the edge of what is and isn't an indie game. Yeah, like Ninja Theory, the company who made it, weren't an independent company prior to this. I don't know who they were owned by, who their publisher was, but they made DMC for Capcom, and they made a couple of other games before that, like Heavenly Sword and one called, was it Enslaved? Odyssey to the West or something. But Hellblade is something they, as far as I'm aware, they made purely independent, and they published it themselves, and it turned out to be quite the success for them. Following the success of Hellblade, I think Microsoft jumped in there and snatched them up, so Ninja Theory are no longer an independent company, but...
The same problem as, who was it? Was it Double Fine?
Is it a problem? No, I think it's, if Microsoft swoops in there, says, here's a big chunk of money to do all that all over again, I'm all for that. As long as they can still keep 100% creative control over what they were doing, like they seem to have.
Are they going to keep 100% creative control?
100%. Well,
I really don't think that happens.
A little bit more, more than the average dev, maybe. But yeah. So Hellblade, it's like a Norse tale. You play as this woman from Norse era, and the story of this game is that she's traveling to Helheim, which I guess is the Norse equivalent of hell in their world, to save the soul of a dead lover, which is really, really grim. And the story itself is really grim from the get-go.
What does that remind me of?
All mythology.
Yeah, keep it going, but that reminds me totally of something.
I'm sure James will find a nice juicy fact of where some of these stories might have come from.
I'm going to look for a factoid.
The game's very intense. So what Ninja Theory's approach to this was that they were going to give their character kind of a mental health condition. Which, when you hear that and you're thinking, oh god, if you're going to do this, you have to get it 100% right, because if you even get it slightly off, you've done it wrong, essentially.
Yeah, you get the tone wrong, you'll shoot yourself in the foot, essentially.
So Ninja Theory are going out. They want to make this incredibly ambitious game with this incredibly ambitious kind of it's not the premise, but it's kind of supporting
hook
to the game, I guess, a support,
which makes it sound gimmicky, which I think they clearly don't do.
Yeah, but the thing is, this isn't a gimmick whatsoever, and from what I've seen, how they approach this, they got everybody involved who knew more about the subject than the developers, to kind of make sure that they were doing it correctly. And so your main character, the Senua character, she has schizophrenia, which makes you sound, why the fuck would I ever want to play that? And, with good cause, but when you're playing it, I mean, it really gives the game this kind of very unsettling element, which I'm guessing is what's playing into the tone, and the torment that character's going through on her journey, and the I guess I wouldn't even call it a gimmick, because I never feel the the idea of the mental health condition never ever feels like a tacked on gimmick in order to kind of shock, the audience, and
It's
never,
not played for shock value.
yeah, it never
essentially.
once feels distasteful. And like again, when you're playing it, the idea is when you play it with headphones on, because if you don't, you're probably kind of not getting the full effect of what they're trying to do as the developer. I mean, it's not, you don't have to, but if you don't, I think you're going to be missing out on a part of what makes this game so unique.
Okay.
And I don't want to, this might sound a bit distasteful, I hope it doesn't, but it's like you're playing a fucking horror game at times, because the intensity of what's going on in your left and your right ear is just overwhelming at times, and it's really, really unsettling, but the experience of what they've done is like so fucking unique, and it really does help give you a different perspective on those kind of things, I guess, as a bonus, could I say that? Like, yeah, it kind of opens your mind up to kind of like what like a torment like that could be like, and it kind of like plays into the character and the plot and what she's going through, and it's incredibly, incredibly ambitious to like do something like that.
Senua's hearing. It's Senua, the main character,
Yes,
right?
yeah,
It's called Senua's Sacrifice, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so she's hearing voices, like she has
Yes.
psychosis.
Yes,
Is it
psychosis,
I
yeah.
don't know. I'm not
Same,
a
there's-
doctor, but you know what I mean.
I may get the odd word wrong here or something like that, so I apologise in advance. I'm not a medical expert, unfortunately. But yeah, so when you're like in the middle of something like how does this play into the game, for instance? Like, so when it's not on all the time, and it usually springs up
Right.
at certain points when you're trying to solve a puzzle or if you're in combat. And like, for instance, when you're in combat, you have the way they've done it's like stereo sound, so what you're hearing in your right ear may be different from what's being said in your left ear, so you're getting these multiple kind of cadence of voices from not only the voice of the actor who plays Senua, because you hear them, but you also get like really like deep, almost masculine voices being spoken to you as well. And when you're in like a puzzle, there's voices that are whispering to you saying like you can't do it, you should just give up. And there's other voices that are telling you to like press on and just keep going. And it's really horrible. It's really awful, even though it's like kind of like, intriguing at the same time. And when you're in combat, it's amplified even more. So when you're in combat,
under moments of high stress, I'm guessing.
yeah, it'll put sort of stress on you as the player, and it's like, and all these voices are like pinging off left and right in your ear, saying like, oh, you should fail, you should just give up, and all these things. And like when you fall in combat, you have a moment to recover yourself, but that's when like everything keeps amplifying. The voices that are trying to give you positive motivation are going directly against the ones that are just trying to drag you down, and it's really, it makes you think, why the fuck would I want to play this? But it's very like compelling in an odd and incredibly unsettling way. And it's when I said earlier, like when you're setting out to do your little, there's nothing little about this game in terms of like your indie project to kind of like help. I guess I think Ninja Theory maybe not in the best place financially at the time. I'm not too sure, and this is like their big like all or nothing game maybe, and they choose something as ambitious as this. It seems like they've pulled it off relatively flawlessly. Like there's been no kind of like conversations about how it's been distasteful or badly done, or it's like tacky or anything like that. Everything feels like that component of it feels directly related to the character of Senua and the world she's in, and it all combines together. It's like tonally consistent and plays into the story and plays into where the story goes, and it's just really, really well done. And one last thing this won't be the one last thing. One thing to add on top of that, I think this is like one of the strengths of games as an interactive medium, is that they can like offer perspective on something like that, like a book or a TV show or a movie couldn't do. I don't think I think this is the only way in which you could experience that level of stress, and like if you wanted to experience it
Through immersion,
yeah,
essentially.
And I think obviously the Norse setting helps you kind of like, it takes down the intensity of it, because obviously you none of us live in that setting. It helps you maybe
Speak
engage
for
with it, like accept it a little bit more. If you know what I mean, it makes it a bit more accessible, I should say.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if it was set in the real world with a real character in a modern day setting, I don't know if, that would maybe add to its intensity.
I think
Be too
maybe
close to the bone, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I
someone
think
would
that's
have a
what
complaint
people-
about it, I think, as well. If you're trying to match it like totally realism, then someone might come out and say, oh, that's not representative of how people are. But if you put it in this sort of setting, it probably gives you a little bit more leeway, a bit more flexibility.
Exactly.
Well, even the real life experiences of players, I think it might cut a little deep for some players. If you're trying to do something
trigger
with psychosis and stress and and this is trigger in the actual genuine medical sense, not in the
not in the game.
You're upset because someone not that you just didn't like this game. It's genuinely, there are some people living with psychosis or schizophrenia who probably would not want to play a game that shows it off in such a an ultra realistic way, almost. So I guess it's not sands off the edges. From what you're saying, it's still pretty intense.
Oh, it's horrible at times.
Manageably intense.
A lot of the times when you're playing this game, and even though I think this game's fantastic, and you do just need to take a break from it. When you play a horror game and you just right, that's too much. I need a break. My heart's racing in my chest. This game gives you that same feeling, but for kind of different reasons, if you know what I mean.
You love this kind of stuff, though, don't you?
I find this stuff incredibly compelling. I love
I can't do it.
how a piece of media can have such an effect on somebody who's just engaging with it.
How terrible can I make myself feel whilst I play a game?
Yeah, I find it oddly interesting. But if they can do it, surely it's success. It's I just found that stuff interesting more than anything.
Sounds cool.
But it's really cool. The game looks fucking amazing as well. This is an indie game for all intents and purposes, but we've got to look at the background. Why does all indie games not look as good as this? So this is a triple I. I think that's one of the things Ninja Theory were kind of trying to get out there. This is a triple I game, triple indie. So you look at Ninja Theory. I think the team size for this game is relatively small in comparison, a big triple A game. But why does this game look so good? It's the team who've been making this have had all they've made some past games that or senior level artists and programmers and here and there, and they've been building their tech on previous games, and all they've done is that they've had this big backlog of tech and stuff they've been building over the years on their previous games, which have included things like motion capture, high fidelity graphics and all that, and they've just taken it and repurposed it into this game. And it's one of the this game, it's only 3 years old, but there's still AAA games out there that don't look as good as this. I'm not going to bash on EA, and I'm not doing that, but if you look at something like Mass Effect Andromeda, I know the scale of that game is monumentally bigger than this game. That's a 60, 70 hour game. Hellblade's, I think it's 8 to 10 hours maybe. Much smaller in scale, but Hellblade looks leaps and bounds better than that game. No discredit any of the artists who worked on Andromeda. I know the work skills larger, and this is much more focused, but in terms of
is that not going to come into it though?
100%, yeah.
If you've got making a 60, 70 hour game and you've got to make the graphics look as good as this, then it's probably going to take you twice as long.
Yeah, and it'll increase the budget by $3 billion. The game looks amazing. The sound design's absolutely amazing. The music and how that plays into it. So the music is I think it's a Norwegian metal band called Combi Christ. And you listen to those guys, and not my thing at all, but you listen to those guys. Incredibly intense music, very heavy. But it fits.
This is Scandinavian metal music, I think.
I could not listen to that music in my spare time. It's too much for me. I like whingy, whiny indie music from England or Scotland or wherever.
I thought you were going to say it was something like that. When you were when you mentioned that it was some Scandinavian group, I didn't think you were going to go metal. I honestly thought it was going to be something like proper Sigur Rós.
No. Well,
now I know why Archie loves it, but it's when you say it's Norwegian death metal or whatever, it's almost I thought that I didn't think that's where you were going with it. I thought with a psychosis you'd have some really the depressing shit you usually listen to, Archie.
Oh yeah,
but
I listen to some cheerful music.
It sounds interesting. It seems weird. Like you said, it's really tastefully done. And even in my head, imagining come on, using metal music with psychosis, it sounds like a wrong.
It all fits,
but obviously I haven't heard it. Yeah, that's what it doesn't. In my head, it doesn't feel like it fits, but you said it does.
So the language it's spoken in, I think it's probably a mixture of many Scandinavian languages combined. It could be Norwegian for all I know.
It could be Old Norse.
Yeah, it could be Old Norse. This is my ignorance. My ignorance of that country is shining through right here, but it all fits. It's all the music is in that kind of very low guttural kind of but it's, it's not English or anything like that, and it just, when you're in combat and this music like pumps up, it fits. But it's not like, like screaming like you would get with like a Slipknot or a Korn or anything like that. It fits perfectly. And not to say that it's all metal music. There's moments of like really peaceful, serene, I guess like Icelandic Sigur Rós kind of music that chimes in at the appropriate moments. And yeah, like tonally, like everything just fits perfectly. I think that's one of the big things I think I bring up. Have I brought this up? But I bring it up with my friends at least when I talk about things like movies and all that. It's like,
we're not your friends anymore, like.
Well, I don't speak to you guys about like movies as much. Like, you know what I mean? But it's one of the things when I speak to people, like tone is something I really like to be like consistent when I watch something. The minute like you have your action scene, and the character cracks a joke, and all the air out of that action scene is just sucked away immediately, and it really annoys us. But this doesn't do that ever, and I love it for that. One of the problems of this game, though, because there are some, is that the puzzle elements are very shallow, unfortunately. So the game's so hell-bent on telling like a compelling story, and it does that pretty successfully, I think. And there's very little combat in this game, but the combat elements are really, really strong, and it seems like they could have maybe put more emphasis on combat and scale back some of their puzzles, because the puzzles do get like a little bit repetitive, and again, they do feel a little bit shallow. An example of one of the puzzles you'll see relatively frequently, they use the same kind of technique numerous times, is that so throughout the game you need to open doors. It's basically like we have this little small area for you to solve something. You open up the door, you go on to the next one, kind of more like do the same thing. And to open doors, you've got to kind of like, like match things up. It's like visual puzzles. You've got to match things up in the environment. So like silhouettes, but you've got to find like, you've got to look at the trees or the twigs in a certain way so that they form this shape. And when they form this shape, it completes the puzzle. Does that make any sense? Yeah, the way
forced perspective, like The Witness almost.
Yeah, exactly like The Witness, but not as, I would say, not as well executed as The Witness. Like The Witness is a whole game based on that, and this is like
The Witness light.
Yeah, and you're doing that, and it's kind of like, oh, I'm doing this puzzle, and you feel less engaged with that side of the game, because immediately what the game wants you to do, and once you've done it the first time, like, oh, that's cool, that was a nice little perspective puzzle. Then another one comes, then another one comes, and you're like, okay, I get
this
it.
Again.
This again, right? And I think it is there to kind of like slow the game down a bit. Like, there's some good puzzles that involve like light and fire and like ghouls and all that later in the game, but you see a lot of the forced perspective puzzles, especially earlier on. Doesn't ruin the game though at all. Games.
Do you think they work well with the tone though? These
see, that's the thing.
They're like easy and repetitive. Are they there because the rest of the game is that intense? Are they literally going, we have to put this in?
Calm down.
If the game was just 100% psychosis and high intensity moments, you'd lose your mind. It'd be too intense for players to play.
Yes.
Perhaps these humdrum puzzles, repetitive puzzles, are there to give you like, I mean, I don't know, a sense of like just to relax you almost, to make you feel calm and safe, and you go, I know this, like a sense of familiarity almost, like nothing weird's gonna speak to me or scare the shit out of us or anything like that. Here's an easy puzzle. I've seen him before. Could it be that, or is it
I think it's more
they had an out less?
With games, I think games, right, and I think to a certain degree why they don't get taken as seriously as like films and all that, because I still think they're kind of like stuck in the realm of being kind of like games, if that makes any sense. There's this expectation that there's something to be solved, there's something to progress, or something to be played. And for me, I'm happy enough to play something like Dear Esther or Everyone's Gone to the Rapture, which is just like, as they're called, walking simulators, where there's no puzzles.
Yes. You
walk from A to B, and the story is just dictated to you as you go. And it's the atmosphere of the world and the storytelling that is the game, essentially. And I think this game maybe realised that it'd be a little bit too short if they took the puzzles out, or maybe there was this we have to put something in. We can't just have this story and the odd combat sequence here with nothing else in between that. But I think they probably could have, to be honest. I think everything else is strong enough. Not to say not all these puzzles are bad, by the way. A lot of them are good, but there's just too much repetition of the same thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, other than that, that's the only gripe I really had with the game, except for one last thing on the last credit. Right at the end of the game, I'm not going to spoil it. When the credits go to roll, they play some electronic music, and it really annoyed me. Like, you've gone this whole game being consistently with music and all these different things, and you're playing some kind of like German electronic music at the end. I'm like, oh, why did you do that?
Bring back the Norwegian metal band.
No, because there's this one moment in the game, right, where it's a moment of like respite. Is that it? When there's a moment of like peace and yeah, where your character is reflecting on how she met up with her lover, the one she's trying to save, and all the colors like illuminate and the greens and blues. And there's this sort of like dialogue going on of how she's trying to remember it, and there's this lovely bit of music playing in the background by the same person who composed all this metal music. I'm like, oh, that's really nice. And it's like, why don't you take that bit of music and put that bit at the end? Because it would still cut, like, in terms of narrative for me at least, made sense. I mean, this track at the end of the credits isn't like a deal breaker, but it's one of those ones of like, oh, why did you do that? Generally, combat's excellent. I think the story's incredibly unique. I think it's really well told. The acting of the main character is superb. Like, the actor isn't an actor. As far as I'm aware, she was a video editor or one of the marketing people at the company who was a stand-in for when they were like, all right, we just need to get some motion capture. I guess you have the closest to the build for the character we think we're going to create, and they just stuck with her. And she's really, really, really good.
That's cool. That's like
yeah.
It was like GLaDOS in Portal, wasn't it? She was the voice of GLaDOS in Portal. She just worked for Valve or something like that. And,
yeah, the same story.
Yeah, she was just a stand, and they were like, "Oh, she's good." Mm-hmm. Like I forget her name, and this is completely underselling it. But imagine if you just went, Margaret in accounts. She kind of looks like her. Do you want to get her in and just make her a placeholder? And they're like, "Holy shit, Margaret deserves an Oscar." Or whatever.
She did win an award for it. Like the big game award. Yeah, I'm sure she won Best Actor or Best Actress. I'm not too sure. No,
that's amazing.
I love Hellblade. It's honestly why I probably picked it. I was going to pick something else, but I'm like, why rather than pick something else just for the sake of why not just talk about it? Like, this is literally one of my favorite games this past generation. It is playing everything I like. I like story, whether it's good or bad. Like, I just like that. And.
You think games should have story, basically?
I don't think they should, but I like it when it's
there. You prefer
games
with
story, I prefer
games
games with story. Like, don't give FIFA a story. That doesn't need one. But, like...
It has one, Archie.
Yeah.
Sorry to drag you kicking and streaming, but yeah, the last couple of iterations have a sort of, like, career mode where you start as a young kid getting, like, scouted to a team.
Yeah.
And you have these, like, interactive cut scenes where you're talking to your agent or your manager or whatever, and it's like the way you do these dialogue choices will decide whether like you get picked for the next game or whether the manager thinks you're a bit of a dick and he's going to put you on the bench. But anyway, yes, every game's at it.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, you also said in our single player podcast that you preferred single player anyway. 100%. So obviously story's a big part of that.
It just feels like a game that just hasn't compromised on its vision like at all. Like, we want to make this game. It's going to be a little bit odd. It's going to be we're going to like have a go at some really like like
tough
risky tough material. I think that's the best way of putting it. Yeah, and we're just going to make it. And I just think they've pulled it off like. I don't think they could have done it better, in honesty, despite the couple of flaws I just mentioned.
Do you think that's because it's an indie game? There's a lot 100%. Less pressure on... If you're a small group of developers, you just decide to do it out of the passion for putting a game together. You're not backed by a humongous company that's ploughed tons of money into it. You can stick more to those principles, can't you?
100%. I think there was a lot of, like... I don't know for sure, but I think it was like, we either make this or we go under. Like, and if we're gonna make something, if this is to be the last thing we make, like, why don't we just make whatever the fuck we want and no one can like give us notes on like, oh, this doesn't appeal to X demographic, you know what I mean, and all that rubbish.
Yeah.
Another thing that I'd like, and I think this goes a long way with game developers. So let's look at when they were like, again, I'm not too sure if this was the make or break. That's just what I remember, but I've probably got a foggy memory. I might be getting it confused with another game around about the same time. But when they were making this game, they were completely transparent about what they were doing, like the entire time. They had like dev diaries, and I was watching them, and you couldn't help but get engrossed in this kind of like, this reality TV of like game development that they were going through. like, we're doing this, and we're getting this person involved, and the idea is that we want to do this. And it was so transparent in what they were doing. And when the game came out, it did have some like game-breaking bugs. That my brother, he was playing it, he got one straight away, and I got it a couple of times, and they were like annoying, but they just got them fixed within like a couple of days, like of the people finding them, so they were very quick to respond. So this won like a lot of good faith, like with the community, and I think that's helped the game even further. And I like Ninja Theory. I've generally liked everything that company has done. Like they did like DMC. I know these aren't indie games, but I thought DMC was fun and strange, and like they were taking like a property and just doing something a bit different with it. I know it wasn't that popular with the Devil May Cry
fans of the franchise. Yeah,
I thought it was great. I thought Enslaved was amazing. Again, just a bit different, and they just seem to experiment with stories and settings, and how many like Norse, like Scandinavian settings can you think of in games? Not many.
Not too many.
So it's quite refreshing. I know the new Assassin's Creed's gonna be set there, but
I guess God of War 4.
God of War 4, but yeah, few and far between. And I just think it's nice to have those things like set outside of the the United States or something like that. Nothing against the Americans, but having everything set in America gets a little bit repetitive sometimes, and having these big tall buildings and everything. I want something to be a little bit different in terms of like history or mythology or anything like that.
There are a limited number of I want to say biomes that games tend to visit. It's like it's either like high fantasy, or what's it called? Not steampunk, cyberpunk. I mean, there's a whole game called Cyberpunk coming out. So, but the idea is like, if it's sci-fi, it's either like Star Wars or gritty. It's the happy one where the goodies are in white and the the baddies wear black or something like that.
Yep.
And or if it's a game in the modern era, it's just they're probably cheaper to make, but it's in a big American metropolis with just perfectly rectangular skyscrapers because they're probably really cheap on hardware requirements. Yeah, it's like, we'll just do we'll make 6 sides, we'll make a big cuboid, and then we'll paint some windows on it. Solved. Kind of thing.
Yeah, I couldn't sell it enough. Again, Microsoft swooped in and bought them, so like an eagle coming down. Yeah, watch the trailer for that sequel. That trailer.
The trailer is unreal, actually. Yeah, I've never played the first game, but I think I've watched that trailer like 10 times. It's so crazy.
It takes you by surprise in an odd way. Like,
yeah.
Oh yeah. I can't wait. Again, I would rather. I had this thing with the Last of Us where I was like, don't make a sequel. It's fine the way it is. And I love The Last of Us Part 2, unlike some people out there, quite a lot of them. And I was the same for Hellblade, like, never ever do a Hellblade 2, but they're doing one. And I'm like, you know what? They've done it, they've never, I don't think this company's really ever done anything, like, even, like, less than good. So I'm just, eager to see what Hellblade 2 is going to be all about. Might have to buy an Xbox to get it, though, which is quite annoying.
Oh, it's going to be an exclusive?
I can imagine
it is. PC and Xbox?
Maybe on PC. All right. Get on PC. No one knows yet, I don't think, but Hellblade 2, I've got my eye on it.
But you said Microsoft bought them out, so
that's where apparently so. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't see them handing that straight over to Sony anytime soon.
Never know. But yeah, I know everyone's played Hellblade pretty much at this point, but I just wanted to gush about it for 35 minutes.
The story at the start you told me, I've figured it out. It's the Orpheus myth from Greek mythology.
Oh, okay.
Going to the underworld to get his wife back. This sounds like the opposite. Go to the underworld to get her husband back. Is that
like gender swapped?
Yeah, one. It sounds like the Orpheus myth, which is it's a cool myth.
So you're a big history boy, James. Would something like this interest you? It's all mythology and it's all about.
Yes, it sounds cool. Yeah. I think when you said it's like an over-reliance on the puzzle aspect of it, it's probably not going to be one of the things I enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Especially as you said, the combat was kind of very well done. So maybe you could have had a better mix of the two rather than the way they went. But it sounds really cool. And I said the trailer for the second game intrigued me enough anyway. So I'll probably go back and play that at some point.
I'll add one last thing, actually, which is one thing I wish they'd kept in the game, but it was part of their marketing... what do you call it? Marketing fucking push, I guess.
The marketing, Archie.
No, yeah, I guess. Like, but okay, whatever. They said that the game, like, right, you've only got 7 lives in total in this game or something. If you die on the 7th time, the game just deletes your save date and you've got to start all over again. And I was playing this game thinking, fuck, that's cool. But then when you're going through this game, you're like 6-7 hours in, and you've died 6 times throughout the game, you're like, fucking hell, this is getting intense. So it only adds to the feeling of like, shit, I cannot. And there's parts later in the game where you're going up against like, a big fleet of enemies, and you're like, and your heart just races in your chest because you do not want to fucking die.
That's an actual thing that actually happens in the game.
No, it was a lie.
Okay, I was going to say that. I'm not sure I like that at all.
I'm so annoyed. I wish you could put it on, though. Maybe they patched it in, but when I played it, that wasn't a part of it, but fuck.
Just a weirdly intense mode setting.
Oh, that really added to the game. It really did.
That would piss me off, I think, if I'd gotten so far in that game and died a 7th time and deleted it. I would probably pick the game up again, like, fuck that.
I like that the game's not very difficult, which helps.
Yeah.
It's more the experience.
It's definitely more the experience. But yeah, Hellblade, fucking excellent, loved it. Definitely one of the best games I've played this generation.
Nice.
Are you done, Archie?
Mm-hmm.
And now it's about time, isn't it? 40 minutes on one game. Tell me, fucking shut up next time.
I'm off, guys. See you later. I'm done. I've done my bit.
Right, so, well, the game I've been playing and been trying to play
if you say
so
Hellblade,
long,
Joe, I'm going to fucking jump in the screen.
Surprise!
You're not going to believe it, Jim. You're not going to believe it. No, I wish I was playing Hellblade, actually. I've been playing... Look, this is one of those things, when you play a game and it's like so critically acclaimed and loved that you think like you must be going mental for not liking it, where you just like, how I just can't fathom how people are enjoying this game to the extent they say they are.
Yeah.
Like, they all must be just having a big joke. It must be just like, pretend this game's really good day. And this isn't because it's a bad game, but I'm just not enjoying it. And the game is Owlboy, right? So the name doesn't sell it. But, yeah, Owlboy is like one of the first games you will find if you like look up indie games. It came out like Hellblade. It came out I think 2017, and it came out I don't know. It apparently released late 2016, but it had been in production since 2007. So this is one of those games where it had such a long development cycle, and I know exactly what they spent the time on, because this is visually probably one of the best pixel art. There you go. There's the graphical style pixel art games ever. But this is what has been recently dubbed as high bit. So it's pixel art, but high resolution. If you get me. So there's a lot of pixels.
Right.
So
okay.
So.
All right. Okay. I'm getting.
Look at any visuals of this game, and you're like, holy shit, that is like a work of art. Like, no screenshot of this game looks bad.
Yeah.
It looks fucking amazing. Like, everything, every background, every character, every animation is like amazing. They've like doubled down on the visuals and went, basically, imagine just polygons didn't exist and all you could work with were pixels. Here is what you'd get. Here's what you can get if you put the effort into making pixel art look amazing. And it's like detailed pixel art, which is like insane to look at. And I want to say that's about it. I mean, I feel that 8 of those 9 years were them just making these visuals. And it looks fantastic. And that's the big sell. Like, when someone talks about this game, first thing you'll see are screenshots and you're like, holy shit, this looks like one of those things where like maybe you go on Twitter and there's this like random pixel artist trying to get their work out there, and they go, here's this one screen that I spent ages on, look at my pixel art skills, and you're like, that's good. The whole game is that good. Do you know what I mean? The whole game looks like the kind of thing that artists would put in their portfolio just to show how good they are at pixel art. And I've owned this game for a while, and because we were doing action adventure, I'm like, I'm gonna jump back into it. I'm gonna give it a go. I've owned it from shortly after it came out on Switch, because everyone banged on about it, and it's never drawn me in. So basically, you are this owl boy in this society of like half human, half owly people that live in like floating islands in the sky kind of thing, which makes for even more incredible visuals. And essentially some shit goes down and some people are trying to like destroy your home. It's super Final Fantasy in its like approach to story. Anyway, so you go off on an adventure and you meet some folk, and I don't want to give any story elements. The story is good. Story is one of the better parts of it, and the visuals are good, but just playing it does not work for me. It's very weird where I'm playing the game and going, I'm not really enjoying this. I'm constantly hitting the screenshot button on my Switch going, oh, that looks amazing, I'm going to save that. Like, oh, if it just played the visuals through and let me take photos, would really work for me. But because you're this owl creature, you can fly everywhere, and that means there's no platforming in it, even though there's a lot of platforms in it. It means that most of the time you're floating around, and the floating doesn't feel very good for me. Like, the problem I had was that the gameplay wasn't engaging. The nebulous concept of game feel really wasn't hitting it off for me. This is the main complaint, and I want to see what's happening in the characters. The characters, they're interesting. It's cool. You meet people along the way who can help you because you basically carry them like like an owl carries like prey in its talons.
Mm-hmm. All right.
You basically flapping around, and you've got someone like hanging off the bottom of you with a gun, like. So you fly around, you move your character around, and then you like aim with the right stick. Obviously, it's pixel art, so it's all 2D. And you're aiming around with the right stick, and you're shooting baddies while swooping around with the left stick. Well, I'd say swooping around. It doesn't feel like you're swooping around. It feels like you're just moving a cursor around the screen. If you get me, that's the kind of like problem with the gameplay. Like, your character is meant to be some big swoopy boy, and he feels like you're moving a cursor on one of those like old computers with the little like nipple mouse in the middle of the keys. Do you remember the old laptops that had that just weird nub?
Oh shit!
In the middle of the keys, and you just have to push it left and right to move the cursor around.
Yeah.
It feels like you're controlling one of them at a lot of times, and I'm like,
so the handling's not very satisfying. Like,
no, it's just like 1-to-1 ratio of the direction you point him in as the direction he goes. So the character doesn't feel like he has any weight, or he builds up any momentum when he flies.
Right, okay, I get you, yeah. It just moves too, like, unrealistic.
Linearly.
Yeah,
linearly.
I know what you mean, yeah.
So yeah, it does feel like those like old games where you moved a cursor around to shoot things, but you did that via a joystick, and you're like, this isn't fun. Like, there's no oomph, and it's a shame, because the guy, the character looks cool. The characters on the bottom of him, the character he's carrying around looks cool. You meet this like motley crew of like unlikely heroes, and the story's really good. But every time I'm playing it, you're just kind of like, right, okay. And there's a few bits, and it's like, it's never really high intensity. The game can be really difficult, but it never feels high intensity, if you get me. So there's parts where you'll die a few times, and you feel like, oh, there should be a challenge. But most of the time, I just never felt like gripped or engaged with it. And having a look online, there are like, it's getting like 97% and stuff like this.
What are the positives about it? What are people saying that, if you went into any of those reviews, like, what are people liking about it that maybe feels at odds with what you dislike about it?
Well,
maybe they're all owl enthusiasts.
They could be. It's like, I don't see anything where it talks about the controls, but they are like, they said a lot of them like praise the gameplay, and like, for me, I don't enjoy playing the game. That's the problem. It's like, I want to know how
big con
how
for
much,
a game.
Yeah, and for me, I'm very like much on the like gameplay heavy side of things. I know, Archie, you said that like you like games that involve like minimal input. I know you like games that also don't, but you're okay with games to involve very little input and just like have you enjoy the experience. For me, it kind of boils my piss when you're into like the 50th minute of a Kojima cutscene, and you're like, yeah, right, I bought a game. I bought a game. I know you're not that much, but you can sit and like hold up on an analog stick and just listen to the story and get immersed in it. And that input of just holding up is like enough for you if the game's immersive. Yes. For me, I'm like, I want something more. Like, I want either my hands or my mind to be very involved with the playing of a game. So either with action adventures, I want it to be testing my skills and knowledge of the game through my choice of inputs and through puzzle solving. And when you're like fighting things in this game, half the time I don't really know what's going on because one, these amazing visuals do not translate for good gameplay because they're so busy and detailed, and you're like, what's foreground, what's background? Like once things start moving, it's too busy. Yeah, it's just like it's too busy. I can't pick out. It's hard to pick out the like the active sprites from the backgrounds because the backgrounds are as detailed as the sprites.
That's a mistake.
So yeah, like I think sometimes it's a case of where like simplicity would have paid off for them in a lot of cases. Like I've played games where like the graphics are so bare bones and it works.
Like Limbo, I guess, to a certain extent. That had a very basic sort of graphical style to it, but it worked in terms of... I mean, obviously we discussed the game, I don't think was exceptionally brilliant, but the actual style of it was really good.
And you knew which character you were and what things you could jump on. There was never an issue where you were like, is that background, that foreground, is that a character that's going to kill me? There's so many pixels, and admittedly I played a lot of this game in portable mode because I play basically my Switch exclusively in portable mode. It's, you know, because it can be moved around, I feel like I'm cheating myself out of one of the main draws of the Switch by playing it in the docked mode. But because I thought that was an issue, I played this on the big telly, and I had the same kind of issue. I'm like, fuck me, it's so noisy. Like, it's hard to play this game, and I don't feel as the player I get any kind of feedback as to what the fuck's going on. You're watching like, you're like, oh, is that an explosion? I don't know. It's kind of like, yeah, I can see like it's orange. Like, okay, if you're fighting things that are orange in like the grassy area, cool. But if you're fighting things that blow up in the fucking lava area, you're like, fuck me, I can't tell what's explosions and what's lava I should be avoiding and what's lava that's just like in the foreground, you know, like in front of the player that you can like pass behind unscathed. And it's like the visuals, like, great for marketing, look amazing, fantastic works went into it, but it seems that like for me they were at odds with the with the game's playability. And then the game's own gameplay didn't grip me either. And fortunately, like, the story like sort of like pulls you along a little bit. You feel like you want to keep playing it because the characters are quite interesting, it's well written, and the dialogue's very good. But again, every time it comes to me playing the game, you kind of like, I'm just not feeling it, and it's just not enough on the action side of action adventure. There's a lot of adventure, and it's well presented, and the music's also amazing. Like, it's all presentation, it's all sheen, and it looks and sounds amazing and tells a brilliant story. But the second the controls are in my hands, I'm not enjoying it. And
sounds like in the last one when I was talking about Pyre, I loved every aspect of it apart from the actual gameplay of it.
Yeah, and this is my problem, and I can't count the number of times I've, like, you know, been on a flight or on a trip, and I've had my Switch with us, and I've went, you know what, I'm going to give Owlboy another blast, and I do, and I'm like, yeah, guess not really. Still not feeling it.
It's awful, that feeling.
Still
though,
playing
isn't it?
through this.
Yeah, especially when everyone else is
like,
getting it.
So...
It's like, what am I missing here?
Then you,
like,
you get angry and you get downvoted and everything, and like.
You post angry videos to Twitter like Archie does, and he's just screaming at people.
Then I make loads of fake accounts and write negative reviews on Metacritic and like.
Yeah. I mean, I'd like to see what the studio does next. I mean, I don't know how they managed to survive for X number of years without putting the game out.
You might be waiting another 10 years to see what they do next. Like,
yeah, and I hope maybe they just go, you know what, we're pretty good at the whole like art side of things. Our visuals are very nice. Maybe we realize that like the visuals were that nice after 9 years. Maybe if they just spent 5 years on the visuals, or half as long as they spent on the visuals, they spent on just like getting some like really like enjoyable tight gameplay, that would work really well. I mean, there's a couple of segments where you do a few different things, and it's not just you controlling this character, and those were kind of cool. And there's another game I played that called Iconoclasts, which was an effort by one guy, which also took several years, but it was one guy did everything. And that game is also like action adventure kind of thing with like RPG elements. And that game is all pixel art, and that game is like fun to play. The controls of that game are really good, and I'm like, there's probably half as many pixels in that game. You know, if you know, we're not measuring by like resolution, but you know, in terms of like definition, that guy didn't go into the same kind of degree of detail that they did for Owlboy, but it still looks great, and it's a great looking game where it's like, you know, law of diminishing returns. I feel like those people created a really nice looking game, and they could have probably still created a really nice looking game if they spent half as much time on the visuals and more time on the gameplay.
Ouch.
And it's
shame.
Yes, to sound like it, big shame.
It's a shame because you've probably if you've looked at the visuals, and even if you look at like footage of the game, I feel like it would look like it's fun. Like you see this character Otis flying around with like little dudes hanging off his feet that he's actually holding them with his hands because he's got like a cape thing. But the mechanics of how he works to fly and carry things doesn't really matter. But he's got a little guy hanging off the bottom of him who's like shooting a gun, essentially, and you can interchange those guys because you've got this like teleportation device that teleports them in and out of your grasp as needed. So they're just happy to like hang off the bottom of you and shoot in the direction you tell them to shoot. And it would probably look fun watching that footage, but when you're actually playing it, you're like, oh, this isn't as fun as I thought it would be. It looked really fun and sounded really fun. And all the footage and all these like, you know, and these bosses you fight that are like magnificently animated.
Mm-hmm.
They're going through their cycles, and you're essentially like what feels to me like moving a mouse cursor around to avoid their attacks.
Damn.
Whilst pointing another mouse cursor in the direction you want to shoot that has a little bit of auto lock on it, but still it's kind of like, cool, I'm moving the left stick that way and the right stick that way, and I'm hammering one of the shoulder buttons to shoot, and now I'm going to press a button to like dodge roll thing, but it feels kind of like slow and it doesn't feel like it goes exactly where you want. But everyone seems to say like the gameplay is mint, and I'm kind of like, is it?
That's
like,
a big shame. That's a big shame.
What have I missed? What, like, why does no one want their character to control like a real bird? Like, I feel like that would be the fun of it. Like, you know, that like there would be some kind of momentum and speed, and he moves around like sluggishly, and you'd be like, if there was momentum and speed and like some kind of like, you know, you'd have trouble changing directions because of your momentum, or you could swoop around and do all this cool shit. It would be like amazing. And this feels like, no, it feels like it's almost point and click.
Okay. Oh man, that's a big shame, because I'd also heard many a good thing about Owlboy.
Yeah, I mean, maybe some people will overlook that, and if you want to, like, a bit of a challenge, it's not the easiest games, and I feel that some players would really get like a huge kick out of the challenge it provides. But I just found that in terms of the challenge, there was a lot of like silly decisions silly like gameplay decision designs where you feel as the player you're just like, this game's just fucking us over. Like there are little like rings you've got to fly through, and if you fly through them all, you get like a little coin bonus, and the coins are used to like unlock shit. It's and there was one part where there was like these two rings, and throughout the whole game you're like flying through these, well, call them rings, sort of undersells their size. They're like these giant hoops, and you constantly fly through them, and once you fly through a sequence of them, you see the little like coin counter go up, and it's like, whoa, you got like 20 more coins and that. And I had one, and I flew through them, and it flew me straight into an enemy that like spawns out the side of a cave. So they put this like hole for a weird snake thing to jump out of a hole in the cave wall, and then two hoops for me to fly straight towards it. Like, I was like, why would you do that? Why would you tell the player fly through these hoops for like hours, and then go, but we'll just put a baddie there so you fly straight into them, which you can't see because there's a fucking hoop in the way of it. And I'm like, the fuck? Why? That's just like a really stupid way. Imagine if they had like coins or rings Like in Mario and Sonic, these are often used to like indicate jumps where you can't see the side of the screen. There's like this really nice thing they'll make you jump to it, and it'll jump you over a chasm where otherwise you'd be like, I don't know if there's anything on the other side of it, so I don't want to risk the jump. But if there's coins over it, you kind of know as the player that you jump over that and it leads you to where you're supposed to jump. This one's like, nah, fuck you, straight into the side of the thing. Like why would you do that? And just like several hours into the game, that just seems like you just weren't even thinking about designing this level. Were you just thinking about like drawing more nice pixel art to put in this game? And that's the whole way it feels. It feels like they just went, we're gonna make the best looking pixel art game you've ever seen.
Do you think the art's compensating for its lack of solid game design?
Well, I don't know, because it took them 9 years, so I'm thinking they just spent the 9 years doing that. And obviously that's hugely underselling it, because it's a longish game. Like it's about 12 hours long, maybe. So there's a lot of game to it, and the visuals are this good all the way through. But I'm like, I feel what you get back out of the visuals diminishes over time, and over 12 hours, you're like, yeah.
Well, if you're not engaged, you'll stop caring, won't you? Like,
I'm not that bothered. I'm not that bothered by the visuals now. It's like,
doesn't matter how pretty something is. If it's not fun, then you're not going to want to play it anymore.
I wanted a game at the end of the day, and I'm glad there are like really talented artists out there. It feels like the gameplay of the game wasn't as finely tuned as the visuals, story, and music were. And I feel like I don't know if they play tested this a lot. I mean, they must have over the course of 9 years. But I just think maybe they should have play tested just the gameplay a bit more, and just made that, because I don't think there'd be that much to change the game to make it an enjoyable experience. Just like more oomph to the character, like better player feedback when like things, when things are dying or shooting at you or something. Just a lot of like, there's not the like sound or visuals to tell the player what they're doing, and the character doesn't feel good at control. And I feel like if they just like slight improvements to all of those, you could overlook everything. So there's someone out there. I mean, it's not a hugely expensive game, and it's regularly on sale. So I think I'd like to see people pick it up and play it and tell me what I've missed.
You're gonna get inundated with emails and tweets now,
and just rage from Owlboy fans.
What?
Yeah, they were like, "Who do you think you are?"
Sounds like the Anodyne thing though. When I played Anodyne 2, getting all these great reviews, and you kind of like, you're eager to jump in, but you just misses the mark for whatever reason. It's like, don't get it.
Yeah, so I think we'll probably leave it there, because I feel Owlboy's got quite hiding from us, and I don't think it's fair. It doesn't feel nice. I think this is the first like overarching negative review I've given for a game. I mean, at least listeners will know I don't just love everything, but it doesn't feel good. This is not why we do this, to go out and slate games. And I really tried. This is the umpteenth time I've tried to play this game, and it just still doesn't work for me. I don't know how many times you have to like go back to a game before you can go, you know what, I've given it a good go, and it's just not working.
What a shame. But it seems to be liked, I mean, regardless, so maybe...
Yeah, so they're not going to... And I've still bought it, so it's like the devs can be like, yeah, well, fuck you, Joe, we've still got your money. I'm like, well, I'm glad you've got my money. You've clearly put a lot of work into this, but I just have a few pointers.
You're allowed an opinion, man.
Yeah, are we? If this is going on the internet, I don't know if we are.
Well, you have to agree with the mob.
So I reckon I've slammed Owlboy enough, so we should probably move on to onto the game you've been playing, Jimmy. So tell us what it is and what you thought of it.
Yeah, I've been playing Axiom Verge, if I pronounced that correctly. Developed by one guy, I think, called Thomas Happ.
That's the one.
What's the
God.
Sorry.
It's a side-scrolling action adventure. Are they called Metroidvanias? Did I get that right?
Yeah, that's the one. It's very Metroidvania.
Yeah, and I'll just off the bat, I'll start off with the cons, because I generally quite liked it, but I will start off with the cons, and one sort of something to give a bit of context as to why I've given a couple of things a con. This whole era of games completely passed me by. I never played a single one of the Metroid games. I never played any games like this when I was growing up at all. So this is my first jump into it, really. And I feel like, although I might be wrong on this, there were a couple of UX improvements that could have been made to this game, considering it was released in 2015. It was not released in the early 1990s. That, in my opinion, would have made it slightly better, but I might just be nitpicking on that. It's definitely heavily retro influenced. Said it looks cool, but to be honest, kind of looks like I did a bit of research on some other games that it apparently was similar to. It looks very much like them as well. It's like very heavily influenced by other side-scrolling Metroidvanias. And I think, as I said, I'll start with the cons. First one was, felt like it could have been any of those games. I don't really think that it looked or played particularly uniquely. And I really didn't like the aspect of retracing my steps all the time. I did not like that about the game.
Then you are fucked for Metroidvania.
Yeah, I know. I said it. That whole thing passed me by. So I'm playing this game and I'm just like, this is really annoying. So Metroidvanias, I said, completely passed me by, and I really didn't like exploring an area, finding out I couldn't get through it, going back somewhere, doing something else, and having to go back to that area once I'd unlocked or picked up an item that allowed me to get through that area. And then the whole going back to a specific place to save the game, otherwise you lose all your progress. That was infuriating, if I'm being perfectly honest. Yeah. I think one quick way to make a vast improvement on this game is just have it auto-save every time you go into a new area. It's so simple. That would have massively improved my quality of life enjoyment in this game. There were several times I felt like I'd gotten quite far but hadn't returned to the save chamber or one of the save chambers, and oh god, had to redo it, and it was just doing me head in, especially knowing that all of the retracing my steps had to be redone. And it's just
the enemies respawn as well, which is
enemies respawn every time you hit, and you come back to that screen. It's like, oh god, like that. There were certain, as I say, like UX things that, as I've never played those games before, I really didn't enjoy those, and I'm not sure if they're still quite as relevant, or maybe should still be appearing in games. I think there are a lot of quality of life upgrades that gaming has had over the last 20, 30 years that have eliminated the need for certain aspects of that. So those were the main two cons that I had with it. Aside from that, though, it looks good. It's got a cool setting. The soundtrack's really cool, and it was an enjoyable game. I mean, you pretty much switch your brain off to play it. You're basically running across a screen, shooting the enemies, grabbing the item, going back, finding that area that was previously unlocked, going through that area, shooting the enemies, grabbing the item, blah blah blah. It is a repetitive style of game, but that in itself is not a terrible thing. It just meant, it's a game I think I could probably jump in and out of for 30 minutes at a time, play short bursts of it, find a save point, and then just play it like that. The story is interesting. I'm not going to, mention what it is, but essentially you play as a character called Trace, and you wake up on this alien planet, and you don't know what's going on, and there's a voice talking to you, and the further you get in the game, the more that is revealed to you why you're there, who you're there to help. It felt very, in its style, it was a cross between The Matrix, Alien... Blade Runner, not so much. I think it felt more sci-fi horror feel to it, so it was more like Alien and Event Horizon.
Geiger thing going on.
Yeah, it definitely felt more like that than Blade Runner. Matrix for sure as well. There was a lot of like Matrixy elements of some of it feeling like a big AI thing that you need to help, and definitely Alien for sure. And then yeah, I mean it was cool. The feel of it was the aesthetics of it were cool. Soundtrack was cool. Story was getting interesting as I was going through. There's just a couple of minor elements of the user experience or quality of your life, I guess, upgrades that I feel like the game could have had, considering it was released in 2015. This is not a retro game. I guess there's enough items. There are a lot of items and power-ups in the game that every time you sort of go through a room, there is something to unlock and upgrade your character with. That kind of keeps you going. but I just really didn't like constantly having to remember which rooms I'd already been in, and then go back that way later on in the game because it's just been unlocked because I just picked up a new gun that unlocks that area, and I have to go all the way back through the levels to do that. And I just feel like it could have just had an upgrade. You know, why do the retracing steps? It's such a big game. You could have just had a game that kind of, not linear necessarily, but kept you going forward all the time without having to constantly retrace your steps. And I just didn't also enjoy the fact that you had to go to a save point. I think these days, any game should be an auto-save situation, especially a game that allows you to replay. So if you die in this game, you basically respawn
at the
save point. There's no sort of end game over screen. There's none of that. There's no lives. So I think, well, if you're going to do that, then why not just have have an auto save at the beginning of every like section? Doesn't have to be every new screen, but every new bit. And that just it annoyed me a little bit when I was playing it, because the rest of it I quite enjoyed. As I said, I'm probably too late to the party for these types of games. It's not something that would be high on my list of games to play, because I feel like the whole Metroidvania thing's completely passed me by. But it was a fun experience while I was playing on it.
Well, I think I'll inject there, because I have played the game, but I also played Super Metroid, and it's like without a doubt like one of my favorite games of all time. I played it as a kid.
Yeah.
And what happened with me was that I think I was probably too young to really get Super Metroid, but I was lucky that I'd been given the game by my cousin, and there was this like random the last save of the game. So if you play any of these types of games, there's always that last save point before you face like the big boss, or you do which is common in like Metroidvania games, I guess what you'd call like the victory lap, where it's basically like the save like sort of after you've beat the big boss, or the save just before you fight a boss that isn't as big as you think it would be because you've got all the power-ups. And then you get to basically use all the power-ups and finish the game. And because of that, I played the game. I like booted it up, didn't realize what I was doing. Played the very last segment of the game with all the power-ups. Like my cousin had clearly used the guide, you know, and found all the hidden things and had all the health and all the weapons and all this shit. Played it through, and I'm like, then it's like the credits are rolling. I'm like, the fuck no, I just started this game. Like, what's going on? I'm like, oh, it's his save. I'll start the game off, but I'm like, holy shit, like, I played this game knowing what this character would become at the end and all the cool shit I would get. So it was, you know, it immediately made it very, very intriguing. And a lot of Metroidvanias since have done this. Someone coined a term for it, but it's basically where they give you all the weapons at the start and then strip you of them, so you've had a taste of the power almost.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And a lot of them do that, but I did that sort of like naturally by accident, which drew me into those types of games. And most of your complaints are, well, actually all of your complaints are completely valid. Like, these are all things that I think are only in there because they are in Super Metroid. And this game wears its inspiration on its sleeve. Like, even the like you know, the little tubes between rooms.
Yeah.
Like, okay, they're not the same design, but the idea that between screens there's a little like metal tube that you open by shooting or by approaching it, that is just how you pass between screens in Super Metroid. In Metroid, that's the thing. The save rooms exactly the same. They don't look the same, but they are like single screen rooms that you stand in, and yeah, you save. I think the fact that saving is in this game, the fact that the UI as well, a lot of the menus and that are similar. Like I think like everything you can see on the screen is just in a bar across the top. I think like you've got like how much ammo you've got, X, how much life you've got, all that.
Up there,
that is all like your health, everything displayed. Like a mini map I think is also up there. All in Metroid. This is all exactly how Super Metroid was presented. This is like,
yeah, that was another one of the.
It's like a fan project almost. It's this guy like clearly loves Super Metroid. I'll make my own Super Metroid with like a few upgrades, but without deviating too far from the original formula. And I feel that's like all of your complaints are the fact that he didn't reinvent the wheel making this game.
Well, it just feels like I could have been playing. And like I say, I haven't played them, but just from what I've seen of the others, it looks like I could be playing any one of those games. those older games from that era. It doesn't look. I mean, I don't mind a game that's influenced by retro games. I don't mind that at all, but I want it to be influenced. I don't want it to be almost a carbon copy of the retro game. As I said, some quality of life upgrades on a game that is influenced by those retro games would have made this, like for me in particular, just that much better. I enjoyed it anyway. I just wish that a couple of things that, gaming has evolved, or aspects of gaming that have evolved over the last 30 years to be better for the user, should be included in this game. It should be retro influenced. It could even be as influenced, I think that's a kind way of putting it, by the way, as influenced as it has been from Metroid, but just with a couple of better upgrades, evolutions.
Quality of life upgrades, basically.
Just to make it a bit better. I mean, the difficulty of the game was engaging. I like that. It wasn't just easy. You didn't just run around and just completely invincible, destroying everything. So it was a good element of challenge in there. I thought that was really good. There was plenty to like about it. It's just, it's funny when there's like one or two little things that kind of you can't look past it. You just there's a couple of little things just say, oh, that winds me up too much that isn't in there, because I feel like that's a really easy thing to have put in for a game, as I say, that was only made 5 years ago, even though it looks like it was made 35 years ago.
Well, I think the thing is, and this might be the same with Owlboy, because both of these games are games that rely like heavily on nostalgia. I'm wondering if Owlboy, much like Axiom Verge, that they're both games. I'm wondering whether or not they're games that are clearly inspired by a certain game, and have literally been, what if this game was made today with the same mentality, if you get me, like with the same mentality but without the technical constraints. And I think that's what's happened in both cases, whereas like with Owlboy, they're like, we made this game, it handles like a game from 30 years ago, which is why I'm probably not enjoying it, but it looks like, imagine if we didn't have the technical constraints to have X number of pixels on the screen, or like what Thomas Happ did with Axiom Verge. This is very much it's Super Metroid without the technical constraints.
But
like,
it seems
the rooms
like
the rooms are bigger, the baddies are bigger, the game is bigger. Do you know what I mean? Like
yes,
the scope has been improved, but they haven't changed anything that was just a design decision.
Yes.
So they've kept all the design decisions of 30 years ago without the technical constraints of 30 years ago. They've basically made a Super Metroid if it could have been played on like modern systems.
But it sounds like to me though that they've done exactly what you're saying there, Joe, but they're not modernizing it. Not that they have to modernize it, but they're not modernizing it enough to feel like something that was made today. Like you're saying, James, that the save data things were an issue for you, and that seems like more of a modern thing that would be included, if you know what I mean. It seems like they are just making nicer looking versions of games they liked back in the day, if you know what I mean.
I'm not sure this looks nicer, if I'm being honest. I went back and looked at some screenshots of some older Metroidvanias, and this looks the same to me. The color palette looks a little bit different, and the design, but that's not a bad thing. Like those games looked cool back then, and this one looks cool now. Like the setting of it's cool. The bosses in it are kind of like interesting, gross looking, weird things. Like
they're like bio machines, aren't they?
Yeah,
they're like half humanoid,
fits,
half mechanical.
Yeah, it all fits nicely. It's tonally all the way through. It stays fairly consistent, but I can't look past the fact that this is a game made 5 years ago that has some of gaming's best quality of life upgrades and evolutions that have happened over the last 20 years completely missing from the game. It just feels really disappointing that something that I feel probably would have been very easy to add to it and would have just elevated it, I think, is missing. It's just like, oh, why is that not there? Why is that just... But as I say, the exploration thing, that might be something that Metroidvania fans really love doing, running backwards and forwards across a map to unlock new things. I missed all that. I didn't grow up with that, so I'm just coming in completely new to a style of a game that I've never really played before, and if I'm being honest, I don't enjoy that aspect of it. I don't like constantly just running backwards where I've been loads of times. And,
that's essentially the loop as well. That's your main complaint there is almost the definition of like Metroidvania.
Yeah.
It's the idea that you are like, there's gatekeeping involved where you basically explore a map which has all its tendrils splaying out in different directions, and you will find like 8 or 9, or the number's not important, but you'll find several dead ends that will be sort of like clearly marked to the player, where you'll be like, oh, I tried to jump up there and it was just out of reach.
Yeah.
And then you run over the other side of the map and it's like, now you can jump twice as high. And then you going, oh, I remember that bit where I couldn't jump high enough. Now I can go there. And that's like, that is the loop. But sadly, it's not. You can't just tell the game, yeah, I've got that now. Can you put me back in that room so I can jump over that thing now?
I just think it would be nicer if there was maybe a more fluid way of representing that in a game. I mean, all games have, a lot of games, you start off as a lowly person and you power yourself up to be able to do all these things, but they do it in a way that I feel is just more enjoyable than running backwards and forwards across the same map to collect things and go back. I just think there maybe could have been a slightly better way of doing it, but maybe I'm missing the point.
Yeah, I think back in the day it was probably the technical constraints that rather than having, you couldn't have X number of screens, you couldn't have as many screens as you wanted, so what you'd do is you'd make the player run back across a screen that already existed, because that'll like give them something to do without making the game feel really small. And it was a way to make the map bigger if you make the character run over this side and then run over that side and still have enemies for them to fight over the way. And it feels now that like you can have that many screens, why make them, if you can have 1,000 screens, don't make them run back across 500 of them. When we had 10 screens, make them run back across, because that turns that into 500 screens by the time you finish the thing, and you can like fill up that screen with like bigger baddies, or you can like trigger harder baddies to appear once they've got a certain point. But
just everything that's happened over the last 20, 30 years in games and things, just why restrict yourself to the same, as you say, without any of the technological restraints now that they probably would have had back then. Why restrict yourself to as if you did have all of those technological restraints? So you could have made a game that was very influenced by Metroidvanias, but with upgrades to it, and it may have.
Yeah.
I probably would have enjoyed it more. I still enjoyed it. I say it's clearly a nicely put together game with some cool design and soundtrack and stuff and interesting aesthetics, but just those little elements of it, it was. I think as well, I mean, I'll be perfectly honest, it does feel like those elements were put in those games to make them longer as well. It wasn't, if you just had to run from one side of a small map to another, and you got power-ups along the way, and just you fought all the bosses straight away, and the game would last probably half an hour. You're running backwards and forwards for hours, climbing up long maps and getting into different rooms all the way up the map, and having to come back. It increases the game by 100%, 150% amount of time. So that's definitely a part of it.
Well, the original Super Metroid is even when you think about it, the original Super Metroid, I think is like actually quite short. Like it is only like 3 or 4 hours in length, with all the like backtracking, and obviously backtracking is a thing. But that's like what made it, in comparison to the games at the time. And I still think like Super Metroid is a flipping classic. Like some of the design decisions that were made for that game have influenced games, but I think maybe in a way that they like moved too far away from what like Super Metroid originally did, and now I think like indie developers are moving back to that, and have been doing for like the last decade, really trying to make games that are like Super Metroid and good. And then you've got that horrible tightrope to walk, I think, where you can if you're gonna make a game that's like Super Metroid, then you can't really fuck with the formula, if you get me. There's no if you're a single dev making a game, if you're going to make a Metroidvania, there is like so little you can change, because there's all those things you talk about. I think, at least speaking from someone like Super Metroid, is like what certain players love about the game.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Maybe I'm missing the thing that people are enjoying the most about it, but
it's like saying make Dark Souls easy. Do you know what I mean? Like, fans of Dark Souls be like, no, that's the very reason we all love it. Admittedly, you could make it easy and just tell the regular fans of the game, you know what, you can still play it on the normal difficulty, in the same way that maybe you could just go, do you want to play it like Super Metroid mode where you have to go to save rooms? Or do you want to go to, like, do you want to like a modern version of it where you can like save wherever? I mean, I played this game on my Switch, so really I could just like sort of like suspend the game if I really wanted to. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know, you could just turn the console off and like leave the game where it was and just resume from there and never save the game ever. I mean, if I died, then I'd be fucked. But if I wanted to just stop playing, then it's that's a quality of life thing where you'd be like, can I just stop playing and you save my progress here, and if I die, I go back to my save point or whatever. You know, there's a lot of things they could have done, but obviously it's one guy.
That's
so
one, exactly, yeah.
And you don't want him to put all the options in and go, can you put all the options in? Can we have like 30 different UIs so that we can have like one that looks like Metroid, but one that's actually modern and good?
And the thing is as well, there's clearly an audience for it, and he was obviously making a game for that audience. Just as I said, that whole, this game that's influenced by games that are decades old was a style of game that I had never played before. So it's just, I'm not the right person probably to be, having not come from that as in the background, maybe not played that years ago. Some of these aspects are probably not meant for me. So, but I mean, obviously, the fact that one guy did it, and it is quite a long game. I mean, I've put a fair number of hours into it so far, and it's it doesn't seem to be. It's not like, as you were saying before, Metroid seems to, what you're saying, 3-4 hours long. Like, this is definitely longer than that already. So, and
you can watch speedrunners do it in like half an hour. It's insane. Like, it's stupid, but
it's good. It's good fun. Cool aesthetic, and if you like Metroidvanias, you'll probably really enjoy it. Just wish it could have had a couple of upgrades. Vouch for that.
It's an interesting experiment. It's kind of interesting to know, like, because with so many indie games, like, hinged on this like nostalgia factor. Like, obviously, there's most indie devs. Well, this is a random guess, but a lot of indie devs, I'm going to assume they're over 20 because they, there's younger indie devs. I get that, but a lot of indie devs are of an age where they want to like make versions of their favorite games growing up. And I mean, good on them for doing it. There's a lot of games that just, with the way the industries went, it's not worth AAA studios bothering their time with it. A AAA studio is not going to make like a rehash of Super Metroid or a rehash of like difficult platformers or a rehash. They're not. It's not worth their time to rehash like 30-40-year-old games.
Mm-hmm.
An indie dev, with the constraints they have and with the tools they now have in the modern age, can easily, in inverted commas, not easily, but they can make a game on their own.
Yes.
By comparison, make a game now that can be as good as like games from the 90s without all the technical constraints that devs had to work around. So I think it's hardly surprising that we see all these devs going, God, imagine if they just kept making Super Metroids. Imagine if they kept making Ninja Gaiden. Imagine if they kept making whatever X, Y, and Z. But as I think you've proven a bit there, these games are like for a specific audience. Mm-hmm. I'd like to know how many people younger than us are that interested in Axiom Verge.
Yeah, like how many people really, really enjoyed this, who were in the same boat as me coming into it.
Yeah.
I would be interested to know, because I feel like a large portion of your enjoyment from this will be the member berries you're going to be consuming.
Well, not even the member berries. I think it's a certain thing. Well, I mean, obviously the nostalgia play is a huge part of it, but I think you've also got the idea that you're playing a specific type of game as well. It's like calling it an acquired taste sounds a bit douchey, but it has to be something that you've already liked before.
Yeah, because you can then forgive all the other elements of it. Like, oh, this is exactly like the games I was playing when I was younger, which I loved. I'm really going to enjoy this. I can forgive some of these things.
Yeah, this is exactly what I want. I want just an experience, almost a carbon copy of that experience I like then. But, I can't play Super Metroid for the 100th time through. It's like, I know where everything is now. I wish someone made a new Super Metroid, and they did.
Yeah, they did with this game.
Exactly. It's definitely something we should also discuss in a plus episode, the member berries and the nostalgia around indie games.
Oh yeah.
So it's interesting to hear what you thought, because I know this is a game I played and loved, but also like I love Super Metroid, so that game was for me, and I'd like to know someone who'd never played any of these games. I was interested in hearing what you'd think about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, a solid. What'd I give it?
You can't give it less than 9. That's not how games work, is it, Archie?
It has to be a 9.
I'd probably give it 6.5 or 7, I would say, for like enjoyment.
You may as well just give it a 0. Let's review bomb it.
Could have been an 8 with those couple of little
with modern upgrades.
Yeah, that's
there's a sequel coming out. He's working on a sequel that he announced. Who knows when it'll come out because it's a single guy, and I don't know how many deadlines he's got.
Yeah,
but it would be interesting to see whether he just has this like the same game, same engine, does it all again but with different settings and powers, or if he pushes the boat out and kind of goes, that was the Super Metroid version, now here's a Metroidvania where you can explore, backtrack, whatever, but with some nice quality of life touches.
Yeah.
So shall we pick of the podcast?
Let's do it.
Archie, we'll go with you because you had the most glowing review of your game, so you've got to sit and decide.
I'll go with Axiom Verge.
Yeah?
Yep. I mean, I haven't played many of them, but I quite like Metroidvanias, and Dark Souls kind of came out of them a little bit, I guess, kind of, sort of.
Definitely. No, definitely. I can see that from Dark Souls.
Yeah, I was going to add actually earlier, but I thought it's probably something we could talk about in a longer topic, is that when you were describing it, James, it just seemed like it was, a direct homage to those old games without ever improving on them for the modern times. Yeah, that was kind of generally what you were saying.
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, and it's just kind of like, I find that quite frustrating a lot of the time. I know people are just trying to kind of like go back and re-enjoy the past and kind of bring them to the modern times in their own way. But it always feels like it's a little bit of like stagnation in the industry when that happens, where people aren't like building on the things they like. And I always like, I think, Souls are like, the Souls games are kind of like Metroidvania to a certain point. They just took one of the ideas and then, what happens if we add this, and this into it, and it changes the game completely, makes it a totally new genre. I'm like, I wish people were a bit more, let's say Metroidvania and add a few more things here and there and see if we can change it. Like, might not work, it might, but you never know. You could invent an entirely new genre out of like experimenting with the formula a bit.
I agree with that because the other argument I would put out there is if you enjoy those old games from the 90s, there are loads of them. Just go play them.
Yeah,
they're there. They serve as like that's the game back then. Like you could, I understand influenced, and there's always going to be influence from lots of games in all games going forward. But I think the point you make there is exactly right. Take elements from it, and it could have been the style of it, the graphical style of it, the combat element of it. Great, keep that, but just feel like it missed an opportunity just to modernize what was clearly a very heavily influenced Metroidvania.
Yeah. I'll come to its defense there because I know exactly what you're saying, and I completely agree. Like, you don't want regurgitated games, I guess, is probably the best way to put it. And the only, being devil's advocate here, I feel as a dev, especially a single dev, you have the issue of risk, if you get me. So I feel like I feel it's the AAA studios that should be doing this. They are the ones that should be taking inspiration from great games and going, we've got tons of money, we can take this risk. It might bomb, it might be genius, it might create a new genre. But as a single dev, just try it, in Axiom Verge's case, this was a single dev. In Owlboy's case, I can't remember the size of the team, but it was 9 years of work it took them to do that. I'd love to know how quickly like a AAA studio could have churned that out without costing them very little, because they just like throw man hours at it, and it just makes me think like obviously there's a lot of risk, and I think if you're going to go out there and make a game inspired by X game, there's only so much you can change, whereas if you change something and it's wrong, or it's not popular, it's not a popular change, I think you might shoot yourself in the foot. So I think by the nature of the industry, I think a lot of these indie devs are sort of forced to play it safe, see what works. And like obviously we want them all to take risks, but it's not my money, it's not my time, it's not they know, and the market's proven that like there's the market for the people that like X game. If you make a good game inspired by it, and very closely inspired, it's sort of like, we'll just take everything everyone liked, and then we'll just give them more of that game. then people will buy it. Obviously, if you went and changed it, I mean, how many people might cry over the fact that, like, there's no save rooms, you can just save it wherever you want. Metroid, you couldn't do that. Or there's no this, that, and the other. Well, you couldn't do that in Metroid. Why didn't you just do it like they did in Metroid? You know what I mean? Like, I feel there's a lot of that, like, how many sales would have been lost, and I think it might have been a lot because, you know, the core audience, I think, is the people who like the original inspired by game.
Yeah.
And then the extra audience is the one after, and you'd love them to do both, but I just feel they don't have the resources or the time or the money to sometimes take these risks. And I feel that's in some cases why they play it safe.
Those risks could bring more people in. Like, the people are like, I don't play those games because they are too old, to this and to that.
I get that, but if it's 90% of your audience and you just turn them away because they really wanted save rooms, to get like an extra 10% of people who are like, oh, thank God, I hated the save rooms.
Yeah, well, not necessarily just that, but I think the minute you sit down and make a game, that's the risk. Like, even if you're saying, I'm going to make an homage, there's no guarantee you're going to pull that off, even with the template of the thing you're inspired by.
No.
You could make it 1-for-1, and it could still be a piece of shit. I'm not saying this game's a piece of shit, but you know what I mean? Like, there's no guarantee this game's going to be a success on any level. Like,
I guess you've also got the option, like, potential those fans are going to come out and say, like, oh,
what a copycat.
You've just ripped off one of my favourite games of all time. Like, you know, that's just a poor man's version of Metroid.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's a fine line by how much you change it, and obviously I haven't played Super Metroid. I can tell you, like, Axiom Verge does add things. There's a few things, like James said, there's a lot of quality of life stuff that he probably could have changed, but didn't. But, like, how much you can change it, like, obviously, I think a lot of devs would probably love the idea of just going out and, like, creating something unique and new that no one's ever done. But if you're gonna commit several years of your life to, like, an indie game project that you're gonna make on your Todd, you might want to go with something tried and tested first. You know, I assume before he made this game, he went, actually, a few people are, like, making, like, Metroidvanias that look a bit cool. I think I could do better than that, or, you know, I see what everyone else is doing and they're selling all right. I feel there's a risk to be mitigated is the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah.
It's like, in an ideal world, the devs could push the boat out and piss all their savings up the wall, and then people go, it's a new genre, but nobody likes it.
Yeah.
You know, and then they're fucked, and they've spent 3 or 4 years of their life making this game, and they're like, why didn't you just stick to, like, the Metroidvania formula? Metroidvania fans love backtracking. Why do you take the backtracking out? You know, it's like, this is the kind of thing. You know, I think it should be the AAAs. I mean, ironically, it's all the indie devs that do push the boat out. It's more like you're more likely to find innovation in indie dev, in indie games anyway. But I really think it's those with all the money and resources that should be pushing the boat out, because they have the collateral to take these risks.
But I guess they have more pressure from above, though, don't they? It's like
and they've got more people involved.
They have more money, but all the people above them want to make more money, so that's the problem. Yeah,
which is it's a shame, because when you have all that money, like, if I was a millionaire, I'd gamble all the time. You know, I'd be like, fuck it, I don't care, money. Do you know what I mean? And it's weird. Obviously, they just want to make more money, which is sad, because it's those with more to lose who are risking more, which is
yeah, and that just shows you where, like, creativity and stuff can happen at its best. You know, sometimes I think with lots of money, people can get carried away with the bells and whistles and forget about all the stuff that makes a really good experience. So, yeah.
Anyway, we'll move on to what you think, Jim. You've got Owlboy or Hellblade: Senua's Sacrifice.
I'll go with Hellblade. That sounded really interesting.
It's also hard not for me. I'll jump on board right there, Jim, as you choose Senua and Hellblade. I think I'm the same. I mean, the problem is I've already played Axiom Verge, so I know how good it is. So I'll try and be diplomatic here. In terms of selling it, Hellblade sounds like a more interesting and innovative experience.
It's intense.
I mean, I'll be far too scared of it to actually ever play it.
Watch the trailer for the second one, Joe.
I don't think fear is the right word. I think it's more severe discomfort.
That's right in your wheelhouse, that, Arch, isn't it?
Obviously. What, like bloating? Like, do I need, like, some Activia?
Your head will feel a bit bloated afterwards.
But this thing, but even that, like, level of intensity, I like a challenge and I like intensity in games, but, you know, like, anything, like, vaguely scary or intense like always like sort of turns me off of games. I play games to have fun. Life is scary and intense enough as it is. Games are my escape. And yeah, like you want the risk, to make the like challenge rewarding. But I definitely don't want like I don't know how much I'll enjoy simulated psychosis.
It's weird. It's very unusual.
But I will at some point give it a go. I think if I give it a go, we'll have to stream it. I think I'll put here on record. Month of October, we'll just do a month of streams of me shitting my pants on on the Twitch.
Just not playing games though. Just you literally.
Yes. Sold.
There's probably an audience for it, to be fair.
There is, but I don't think it's on Twitch.
You'll be surprised.
I was going to say, if anywhere, wouldn't it be
there? I don't think it's not the site Twitch. I think it's there's probably a different site where I can webcam myself shitting myself. Right.
And on that note,
I think we'll on that note we'll leave it then. Thank everyone for listening, and just remind them to like, comment, subscribe, all the good stuff. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, and perhaps even join our Discord where you can argue with us about what you thought of these games. We'll see you next time.
Ta-ra!
Ta-ra!
See you later.